One of my good friends asked me to look at his mower because it wasn't starting. Now, it was working fine last year, but after this last winter, it would not start. From what they tell me, nothing out of the ordinary happened to it. They didn't hit anything they shouldn't have, and the fuel was fresh at the time it was put into the tank. So hopefully it's just a carb issue and nothing else, but you know how that goes. In today's video, we look at this Troy-Bilt mower, and the problem is that it ran last year. However, it's not wanting to start this year. Now, if you have one of these mowers, it's a good chance as long as nothing out of the ordinary happened to it. The issue is only related to the carb and nothing else, but we need to inspect it first and rule out the other possibilities. Now, I'm going to try and repair this mower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, we're only going to mention what these other options could be. We don't have enough time to look into them, but if you need more information on these other options, you're welcome to ask as many questions as you need to. After taking a look around, I don't see any real damage to it, and it seems like it's been well taken care of too. I did pull on the rope, and it felt like it should because I could feel the engine fighting back on the compression stroke. Now, the first thing I want to do is look at the fuel tank to see if there's any fuel in it, and as you can see, there's plenty of fuel in the tank, which is good because we'll be able to drain it and inspect its condition here in a little bit. Another reason why this engine might not be starting is an air filter that's wet with fuel or oil, and of course dirt or debris. And by the looks of this one, not much air is going to get through it. It's covered in oil, which is a pretty good reason why air won't get into the engine. If the air won't pass through the filter, too much fuel will get pulled into the engine instead. For right now, I'm going to leave the air filter out of the box. While we're looking at the fluids, we of course have to check out the oil level and see if it's low or even if it's too high, which can also cause problems with the engine as well. Now remember to wipe the dipstick clean first and then reinsert it back into the engine. And it looks like the oil is right at the top opening, which is the full mark, and its color looks like it's fresh oil as well, so I'm not going to have to change the oil for once. Now, I do want to take a look at the blade and see if there are any serious gouges in it, which would cause the flywheel key to shear and also cause the engine not to start. So there is a pretty serious gouge on the blade, but it's not fresh, so it's been running like this for a while, which means it's not a reason for the engine's problems. Next, I want to try and start the engine and show you what it's doing. So of course it's not going to start, which means we're going to have to help it to start. Now this is an auto choking carb, so there's no priming needed, but if that system fails, it will not allow the engine to start. What I'm going to do is to physically prime it with some fuel to see if we can get it started. This way, if the engine starts but then dies, it means we have a carb issue to fix. So luckily it started and ran for a few seconds, but unfortunately it did not stay running. That means it only ran on the fuel we put into the carb, and the fuel that's already in the carb is not getting to the engine. That means we need to get to the carb and inspect the main fuel jet for a clog. I do want to drain the fuel out of the tank, 1, to inspect it, and 2, so we don't make a huge mess when taking apart the carb. Now gasoline will start off pretty clear with a small amount of color to it, but over time it will get darker, and the darker it gets, it's less likely to start your engine. Now the fuel does have some color to it, but it's not stale. In fact, to prove my point, I'll put this fuel back into the tank when we get done. There is some debris floating in it, but it's large enough that the filter at the bottom of the tank should catch it. Next, I need to take the air filter base off so we can get more access to the carb, and there's a good reason why. I plan on not taking the carb off the engine, and there's a couple of good reasons why, which I'll explain here in a minute. The first thing I need to do is to drain the fuel from the bowl by using a large Allen wrench to open the drain. You only need to turn the Allen a quarter turn to open it. After that, I'll put my slide down to direct the fuel away from the deck. To be honest, I think this is the first time I've drained this style of carb on camera. It was kind of surprising just how long it took for the fuel to stop dripping from the drain. As helpful as it is, I may not use the drain again because this takes too much time to do. So almost 2 minutes later, it finally slowed down enough for me to work on it. Instead of taking off the carb, I'm going to remove just the bowl so I can get access to the fuel jet. To get the bowl off, I just need to remove these 2 fasteners and then carefully pry the bowl away from the rest of the carb. The biggest reason to do it this way is simplicity. I won't go into the specifics just yet, but doing it this way could get this mower out the door sooner, which will make the owner a lot happier. In fact, I think I might have to time myself someday taking this shortcut and comparing it to the way I would normally do it. Now, if you take the bowl off and the carb is gummed up or there's something else wrong with it, I would then change my plans and take the rest of the carb off as well. Once the bowl is free, we can take a good look at it. And I know it's hard to tell on screen, but it looks like there's tiny bits of debris in the bowl. However, it's nothing too serious. I'll just give it a good wipe down with a clean rag. Also, don't forget to close the drain, otherwise you'll find out it's still open once you put fuel back into the tank. To see the fuel jet, simply lift up the white float out of the way. The round brass piece is the jet, and it's hard to tell, but I can't see through it, so it must be clogged. To clear the jet, I'm going to use a wire tie from a loaf of bread. I just peeled the plastic off, and I'm going to just wiggle it around in the opening for a bit. Now, there are other ways to clear the jet, but I find this way to be very convenient. After clearing the jet for about a minute, it doesn't look any better, but that's because there's some fuel in this area. If I had used some compressed air, the opening would look much clearer. Now that I'm done, we just need to put the bowl back onto the carb and put everything back on. There is only one way to put the bowl back on, and that's because the pickup tube has to sit in the relief at the bottom of the bowl. If the bowl is put on the wrong way, it's very doubtful the bowl would even seat properly to the carb. Once the bolts have been started by hand, I'll then use them as guides while I push the bowl into place. After that, I'll carefully tighten the fasteners, making sure I don't over-tighten them. If you do over-tighten them, you'll strip out the plastic. If that does happen, there are ways to fix it, but I'm not going to cover that in this video. So the other reason why not taking off the carb is a good thing is that you don't have to bother taking off the fuel line, and that's because it's kind of a hassle. It's very short and the ports are made out of plastic, so you run the risk of breaking them. Speaking of breaking plastic parts, the throttle and choke levers are also made out of plastic, and while disconnecting their linkages, you can also break them. The same goes for the base for the auto choke system. In general, all the plastics on here will eventually break, so not having to deal with them is a good thing. Now, when replacing the air filter base, don't forget to reconnect the emissions breather hose to the large port on the back, otherwise the engine will breathe in unfiltered air, which will then cause it to wear out prematurely. Now, while these parts were off the engine, I also took the liberty of cleaning them, that way dirt won't get inside the engine. I'm also going to leave the air filter out for testing purposes, and once I know the engine's good, I'll order a box of new filters. Like I said earlier, I'm going to put the fuel that came out of the tank back into it just to prove that it's still good. Otherwise, I would use 100% gasoline, which is ethanol free and that's been stabilized for storage. The last thing I need to do is, of course, service the wheels so they'll last longer and, more importantly, be easier to spin, which will then make the mower easier to use. After removing the wheels, I'm going to clean the axle if it needs it and then spray some lube on them. I'm also going to spray it on the supports for the drive system. I like using lithium grease in a can because it's convenient to use, and you can find these at your local big box stores or at an auto parts store. Now, the drive wheels will benefit more from it because it will free up some power from the engine to be used for the blade. However, the biggest gains, at least visually, will be from the non-driven wheels. The process is the same, minus having to lubricate any drive components. Now, you don't have to do this very often, but once a year should be enough to guarantee reduced wear on the wheels for the life of the mower. After a single application, you can already see its benefits, so I would consider this a must-try if you've never done it before. Now, you don't have to use lithium. Any grease you have on hand will do, although I would probably not use motor oil, but WD-40 or any light oil should also work. If you've seen my videos before, you know what I have to do next. If your wheels wobble already, this may not help, but you might want to consider adding a shim to the axle or adding a metal sleeve to the wheel to fix it, then of course putting a lubricant on the axle or bolt depending upon your model. While I was pushing the mower to the area where I do my test starts, I was greeted by a couple of skittish dogs. I've seen them back here before, but they never let me get too close to them. They finally left the area, so I think it's time to do a test start. Luckily, the engine started and ran just like it's supposed to. However, it started to burn some oil after about 20 seconds after starting the engine. I think it's related to the same reason why the air filter was covered in oil. At some point, this mower must have been tilted on its side, probably during transit, and the remaining oil came out of the breather hose and burned in the engine. The other option is that the oil was already in the muffler and it started to burn up as the muffler got hotter. Either way, it stopped pretty soon after, and I didn't see it again afterwards. In the end, this mower is working just like it's supposed to, and it's going to have more power while cutting since we were able to free some power up by reducing the drag from the wheels. I ordered the air filters and they should be here in a couple of days. Hopefully, they'll run the mower out of fuel in November to keep this from happening again. So my question is, after watching this video, would you consider lubricating your wheels? If you go back to my older videos, I used to never do this, but after realizing its benefits, I'm going to have to do this to every mower I get, no matter if I film it or not. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.